and welcome to another video in my IELTS Learning Tips video series. And as I promised last week, today we're going to be looking at Task 1 for General Training. My name's Bernie Wall, and if you haven't met me before, then I'm an IELTS trainer, and I specialise in working with students who need Band 7 and 8 in their exam, either overall or in each part or some of the parts. So today we're going to look at General Training Task 1, and I'm going to look at a little bit about the analysing the question and then making a plan so that you can execute a really good letter in your exam. So I know a lot of people are not worried about the letter and feel that it's quite easy to do. I'm not so sure that's true. And I think if you should be paying just as much attention to the letter as you do to the task 2 itself. So if you get everything right in the letter, the style, the tone, the right sort of language, and you have the right approach, then that's really going to sort of start the examiner off in a good frame of mind. And it will also help you then to go positively into task 2. So whether you're doing academic or general training, putting some focus onto task 1 is a really good idea. So don't neglect it. And don't sort of put all your eggs into the task 2 basket, because task 1, although it's worth fewer marks, is still an integral part of the writing and an important part of the writing. Okay, so as always, I've prepared a short slideshow, so I will jump over to that and we'll get started. So how to plan your general training, task 1. And it is important, and I've written here, to demonstrate your best language. Just like in the speaking, don't forget that you are in control of this part. It's unlike the listening and reading where you don't know what's going to come up. You don't know what the questions or the texts or the listening content is going to be. Here, everything that goes down on that piece of paper is from you. So you are in control. And because of that, there's an opportunity here to really demonstrate everything that is good about your language. So remember, this is a performance. This is showing the examiner, I have got good vocabulary, good structure. I can come up with some ideas and express them well. And I can do that in a very cohesive way so that, you will be able to understand and appreciate everything that I'm saying. So it's in your hands. It really is. And so you should really pull out all the stops to make sure that you do your best and show the best that you can do. So let's move on. And the first things we need to think about for the letter is what kind of letter, what type of letter. So as you know, there are 3 types: formal, informal, and semi-formal. And you need to, when you look at the question, decide which of these 3 types is the letter that you have to write. Then you need to think about the subject of the letter. So it could be a letter to a bank manager asking for a new credit card, or it might be a letter to your friend asking them to come and look after your dog. A whole range of different subjects, but you have to decide on the subject. You have to look at the subject and then think about what you're going to say. And a good way of thinking about what to write in the letter is to think about the response that you want. So if you write to your friend and ask them to come and look after your dog while you're on holiday, one assumes the response you want is an enthusiastic yes. So write it so that you will get this response from your friend. If you're asking the bank manager for a new credit card, then again, what you want is for them to send you a new credit card. So make sure also that you write it so that the bank manager can see immediately what it is that you want them to do. And write the letter to get that reply. So when you write your letter, have in mind how you want them to react when they get it. And also think about the relationship. Is this a close relationship, as in a friend or a family member? Or is it a very distant relationship, as in somebody that you have never met and who is a complete stranger? And that's important too, about the style and the language that you use. Okay, so let's start with formal letters. You don't know the person, therefore it must be very formal. You don't want to upset them, and you don't want to be familiar, because that's not appropriate. You need to give clear information and instructions. Don't give a lot of detail. Don't tell them a story. They don't want to know your story. They just want the bare bones. Okay, instructions about what you want them to do. Imagine they're busy. So they don't have time to go through everything. They just want to know who you are, what's happened, and what you want them to do. And be precise and to the point. Don't go off at a tangent. Don't pad it with a lot of information that's not relevant. And be polite. So use woulds and coulds and I'd be grateful, all of those formal things, because it's a stranger. Okay. The opposite, you know them, they're a friend, they're a relative, it's a very close relationship. You can be chatty, ask them what they're doing, give some information, say things like, I haven't seen you for ages, what are you up to, that sort of thing. Think of it as a conversation face to face and use the same type of language. It has to be informal. You wouldn't use formal language to a friend or a brother or sister. And you can use idioms and phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are really, really useful for these informal letters. Idioms, if there is an idiom that is appropriate, then use it. But don't stuff it with idioms that you've just learned for the sake of learning. They've got to be appropriate. So what I would do is go with phrasal verbs as far as you can. And then if there are some idioms that you know that you can use in any situation, then by all means put them in. And if an idiom pops into your head that would be appropriate, then yes, use it. Okay, and these are somewhere in the middle. So it could be that you know the person, but the topic is a bit sensitive for some reason. Or it could be that it's a formal relationship, like a boss, and you might be making an observation or giving some advice about something you've noticed in the workplace. So the style will be a bit more neutral, not too formal, but also not too informal. And the golden rule is, if the more difficult the job for that person, the more difficult it is for them to fulfill, the more formal you go. So if you're asking your brother, for example, to lend you his Pride and Joy Porsche, you're not going to say, give me the keys. You're going to be a little bit more formal for that. So the more difficult, the more formal. Okay, and it can be friendly, but there will be elements of formality that you'll need to include. So if you're writing to somebody about a formal invitation, for example, you will need to give them the details of the event and also ask them to respond. Here's an example of a semi-formal. So the neighbours have a noisy dog, it's stopping you from sleeping, and you need to let them know about this and ask them to do something about it. Okay, so you will know your neighbour, you'll probably know their name, and you may know them even a little bit, or you may know them very well. It's a little bit sensitive because you're complaining, so you have to be a little bit careful with your language. You probably don't want to write this letter, and you don't want to upset them, so it's a little bit reluctant. So it might need to be slightly more formal. Okay, I said that before. They probably don't realize it's happening, and so they might be a little bit surprised and upset themselves. You want them to apologize, and you want them to do something about the dog. Probably doing something about the dog is more important than any apology. So this is a a semi-formal letter because it's a friend or somebody you know, but a difficult subject, and you need them to do something about the problem. Okay, so as before, create an outline. So you writing about this problem with the dog. You can use some formalish language. Unfortunately, I'm afraid, I want to bring to your attention, I hope the situation can be resolved. So these are slightly formal but appropriate here. Okay, this is the bare bones. The dog barks when they go to bed, on and off all night. Any sound starts the dog, cannot sleep. And then a question, has something upset the dog? It never happened before. And then in paragraph 2, it's worse because you're studying for some exams and you're not able to study because you can't sleep. And it's also affecting your partner because they can't sleep either. So you need them to do something very quickly. And you're sorry about having to bring this problem up, but it is becoming quite unbearable. Okay, so then flesh this out into full sentences, but you've got quite a good skeleton there for a semi-formal letter. Okay, and then when you start writing, and I said the same things about academic task 1, think about your sentence structures, a good variety. Think about your vocabulary and any idioms. Here you're not going to use a lot of idioms, but you could use phrasal verbs. Don't be flippant, it's quite a serious topic. Think about the grammar. You know, here try and use some complex sentences. Think about cohesion. Think about the style, which is going to be friendly, but also a little bit firm because you need them to do something. You need a good range of linking words. Okay, and here's another example. So this time it's a letter to a friend. Okay, it's a little bit of a problem because you've taken a book or you've got a book that belongs to them, but it's just a case of trying to sort out the problem and get the book to them. So overall, it should be a friendly letter and possibly a chatty letter too. Okay, so let's organize the ideas. It's a tricky topic because you don't know how much they might need the book at the moment, but the friend is a very good friend, so they'll understand. Okay, don't forget to ask how they are, what they're up to, etc. Haven't seen you for ages, that sort of information. Apologize and offer to do something about it. Be friendly, you can use idioms, again, use phrasal verbs. Don't use any formal words and phrases, they wouldn't be appropriate. If you write a formal sort of letter to a family member or friend, it just looks a bit strange because you wouldn't tend to use that language with them. Write it as if you're having the conversation. So think about if the person were in front of you, what would you say to them? And then write it like that, so long as it's complete sentences. Obviously, when we're speaking, we don't always use really complete sentences, and you have to in a letter. But the tone and the kind of vocabulary will be similar. Try and have a friend of yours in mind when you write the letter. It's a good idea. So think about who you're writing to and what kinds of things you would say to that person when you were talking to them, and then include some of that. Okay, and here's a brief outline. So ask how they are, how they've settled back, have they managed to get a job, then explain the problem and apologize and offer to give it back. And I've actually highlighted some phrasal verbs here that you could use. So settle back, sort out, give back, get back. And there's another one here, bring over. So the offer is to post, or because you're going to the country later in the year, you could bring it, and that would give you an excuse. There's also pop in there, but it's not in the orange. Sorry, I forgot to change the colour, but pop in is also a phrasal verb. And then some more phrasal verbs. Sorry to hang on to it. I'll definitely get it back. and look forward to hanging out later in the year. So all of these are quite helpful and give an informal feel to your letter. And then you flesh it out and write the letter. So bear in mind all the things we mentioned before about grammar, cohesion, linking words, etc. And also expand to full sentences, you know that. Think about vocabulary. So if you're writing a formal letter, you're probably going to be using passive quite a bit, because we don't usually address people directly if we don't know them. And you'll use formal vocabulary. So for example, in a formal letter, there will be no phrasal verbs. If it's an informal letter, you'll be using friendly vocabulary. You could use some contractions and phrasal verbs and idioms. If it's semi-formal, it will be somewhere in the middle, a little bit more neutral. Try to keep near the word count, around 180, 190. I do have 2 examples for you. The 2 examples actually go to 200, but I left them because there's some good vocabulary in there. But I think 200 is probably a little bit too long if you want to manage your time. So try and stick around 180, 190 maximum. And try and have time to check your work. So that's another reason for not writing too much. Okay, and you can find the 2 tasks, the 2 examples that I've written on my website, IELTSlearningtips.com. So thank you for watching this video. I hope that was useful. I urge you to go and get the examples and then compare with the little outlines that I've created here. And you can see how the outline goes into the task. And if you do it this way with a skeleton, and then think when you're writing about the language, about the sentences, the linking words, the vocabulary, you'll find that you'll be able to do it a lot more quickly and also more accurately. So I hope that was useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you.